What's up everybody, it's Eero here. And today I'm going to explain you one of the biggest mistakes that people do when they train their legs, and that's the lack of hip flexion. Training the hip flexion, which is basically this motion right here, trains the hip flexor muscles. The reason why I think most people neglect this is, first of all, it has such a bad rep of being like the cause for tight hips. Most people, it's so common, there's like tons of videos that only recommend to basically stretch the muscle, not really strengthen it. It's tight, it's overworked, everybody's sitting down so it's tight and you just need to stretch and like relax the muscle. But in reality, like when you have tight places, the most common cause for that is weak muscles. You have summer weakness. It's not like people always say, oh, I should perhaps stretch more, I need to do more stretching. The fact is that you should do perhaps more strengthening and train smarter, and that's how you can cure tightness in the body. But so the thing why it's so important, if you think about the hip flexion, where does it happen when you move around? It's everywhere. And hip flexors also don't just have the one function, which is the flexion of the hips. They have other functions like the rotation as well and stabilizing. But the fact is that when you jump, for example, it creates an enormous amount of power when you flex your hip up, right? So when you kick anything, you kick a ball, you kick with the knee, you kick the front kick, whatever you do, when you're squatting down, you need those hip flexors. Most people think that it's just a passive thing, but they are important in creating tension in your hips, tension which leads to power basically from other areas of the body like your glutes, your hamstrings, quadriceps. So they work in so many multiple things in everyday life and functionality. Almost in everything they play a role. There's also multiple parts in the hip flexors around, basically from the medial compartment all the way to the lateral compartment. You have parts of the adductors. There's the quadriceps muscle, you got the rectus femoris, you got the TFL, and then you of course have the psoas muscle there as well. And these need to be trained kind of separately if you want to truly develop these muscles to their full potential and have the benefits in regards to the functional strength and even your hip health. We can talk about like hip impingement type of problems and pains. So how do you train the hip flexors? Most people usually target them kind of indirectly when they're training their abdominals. They kind of play a role. Usually the abdominal exercises consist hip flexion in them, but that's really not enough. The way to properly target them is to truly try to isolate this hip flexion motion, and then requires you to basically contract and stabilize your core and really focus on those muscles so that you make them work. And this is the way also that we do it in the Athlete Training Exercise System. And it's one of the rare programs that truly targets every single function of our legs properly. So, as I said, you can do these exercises basically lying down, just raising your legs up. Lying leg raise, when done properly, will train quite nicely, and very slowly it will train nicely the hip flexors. You can do standing up. This is one of those exercises in the Athlete Training X, for example, when we did the slow stability front leg raise, basically. A very good way. It's very subtle. Most people do these things and they never really properly target the muscle. You can also do basically fast. That's one of the things in the system we target. In the Athlete Training, we target lying down, we target standing. We also do with explosive motion as well. So when you have gotten down the initial control, you need to condition it also for those explosive jumps, kicking, and running and such, sprinting, for example. So you should train them, and the great way to start is just this. Practice this basic hip flexion here. All right. Hip sit-up is a great way to train it, but it's very advanced, super excruciating. There's so much resistance when you need to raise your whole body and you need to stabilize extremely hard. So you can try that as well. But in reality, you really need a multitude of exercises to properly target this whole area and make it functional and strong. And that's it for this time. Train your hip flexors if you want to get functional, strong legs, and I will see you next time.